Okay, today we're going to talk about how to use a scale ruler. The kind that we use in theater is the architect scale rule, not the engineering scale rule. So both the architect scale rule and the engineering scale rule will be found in the same place when you go to purchase one, but you definitely want the architects. And the way that you can check for that is you should turn to look and see if it says 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and 1/8 inch on it, as this one says here. So usually they're clearly labeled, but that's one quick way to tell. When you see the engineering scale rule, it'll be something like 1/100 or something like that. So you don't want that. There are different sizes and materials that scale rules come in. So this one's a pretty standard size scale rule. It's made of metal. Metal's really great because it really holds up to a lot of wear and tear. The plastic ones can get nicked, and the letters and numbers can sort of get picked off and whatnot. There's smaller ones like the mini scale rule. I tend to buy these at Blick, which is the art store up in Seattle. I'm sure you can find them elsewhere. But the mini one is really great if you're making something tiny, like tiny scale furniture and whatnot. There's also longer scale rules as well, which are very helpful when drafting because you're usually working on a bit of a larger scale. So make sure to pick a tool that actually works for the project that you're working on, because application matters with the size. This also is true for something like a straight edge. And so this here is a clear triangle. Clear triangles are fantastic because you can see through them and strike a line. One of the cardinal sins of scale rules is going here and saying, oh, I would like this to be 2 inches long, and then actually striking the line against the ruler. You do not want to do that. There's a couple reasons. One, if you do that, you're going to end up with this graphite buildup on the actual ruler. And one of the reasons you do not want to do that is because you may end up drafting. And if you're drafting, you don't want to be dragging that graphite all over the place, okay? That's why these plastic straight edges are the way to go. Also, it's going to end up marking up your scale rule, which is going to make it really hard to read over time. And you're going to have to wipe it down with some harsh chemicals, which is going to slowly eat away at your numbering here. So just don't do that. That's bad. Go ahead and put the scale rule down, and you can make a little tick mark. If you accidentally hit it with your pencil, that's okay. But it's really best if you use a straight edge to actually strike the line then. So I am going to first talk about the regular ruler side to the scale rule. So we've all been using regular rulers for a very, very long time. And so I'm just going to explain the imperial system here, because we know that not everyone comes to us using the imperial system, because it's just pretty much the US and the UK. So we use this wackadoodle system, unlike the metric system, where there are 12 inches in every foot. And so when we look at this scale rule here, we're going to see 12 inches representing this foot-long scale rule. It says 16 right here. The 16 means that this particular ruler is broken down into 16 increments per inch. And so that means that this tiny little mark here is 1/16. This is 2/16. This is 3/16, 4/16, and so on and so forth. But of course, when we get to every increment of 2, it goes from 1/16 to 1/8 to 3/16 to 1/4, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so we know that we've got 1/4 inches, 1/2 inches, and full inches. And so this is what we're going to turn into the actual scale. So if we rotate, we're going to see various things. I'm going to focus for now on this side. So you've got the 1 inch, the 1/2 inch, the 1/4 inch, and the 1/8 inch. So for each of these scales, much like everything on the scale ruler, the number at the beginning here tells us what the representation is per foot. So in this case, this is 1 inch equals 1 foot. So from here to here is 1 inch, and that equals a foot. The opposite side, half of a inch is a half inch. So that means that every half inch represents a foot in real space. So we start at the 0, this is 1, even though it says 10, and this is where people can get confused pretty easily, especially when you get to the middle here, okay? So you've got the larger numbers counting from the 1 inch side, and then you've got the smaller numbers counting from the half inch side. Then we've got 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch. So 1/8 inch is very uncommon in theater because it's just too darn tiny. But 1/4 inch is very common because this is usually the scale that we need to create main stage theaters in. So you can see that there are all these little marks here, just like there are little marks here, to the left of the 0. And that means that those are inches. So we're just going to ignore those for the moment. We're going to start with the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you ever need to just go through and count, because it's unclear or you're afraid you're going to get distracted by the other side, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and go 1, 2, 3, 4 as you're counting when you're trying to measure. So what you're going to do, and I'm going to use this piece of paper because I know it might be very difficult for you to see when it's on its side like this, right? So I've just made a copy of a scale ruler, and I've got my 1/4 inch side here. I'm going to measure my first line. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore these inches here, okay? And I'm going to put this 0 at the end of the line. So with the 0 at the end of the line, I can now try and measure how long this thing is. So if I go ahead and follow my eye along here, I'm going to get to a 26. And I know I'm using the big numbers because I'm paying attention to, you know, this side here. If I needed to count it out, I would. So it almost ends exactly at the 26. So we know that this is 26 feet, okay? This gets a little more complicated if it doesn't exactly end perfectly on a foot, right? So if I go ahead and line the 0 up here and I come to the end, you can see that it goes past the 36 just a little bit, okay? So it's about halfway, right? It looks pretty darn close to halfway. So if it's halfway between 36 and 37, we know that it's 36 foot 6 inches, right? Because half of a foot is 6 inches. So what happens if it doesn't end up on a line at all? It's somewhere between two lines. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put my 0 mark right here, okay, at the very end. And I'm going to go across here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, it's going a little past 9, but it doesn't get all the way to halfway. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this to the end, the 9 foot. You don't want to slide half feet. You want to slide to the nearest foot. Okay, so we know it's 9 feet and something inches, and this is why these inches live to the left over here of the 0 mark. Okay, so from the 0 mark we have this much space this way, and so I can just go in here and I can count these little tick marks. So I can say 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that means it's 9 foot 3 inches. Okay, it's very important to remember this. I'm going to put the ruler here and then slide to the nearest foot. Don't get distracted by the half feet. To do to the nearest full foot, because you've got a full foot of inches to measure over here. And they can be really tiny, especially in 1/4 inch, okay? So you're going to want to make sure that you sort of eyeball it as best you can, but don't over stress it, okay? It doesn't have to be perfect. If it's 6 inches or 7 inches, that can matter in real life, but it doesn't really matter that much at this moment, okay? And that's often why larger scales are used, something like 1 foot scale, right? If I were using 1 foot scale here, could line up this 0, and I could slide this here, right? And so this would be 9 feet, right? And I would be able to see even closer to the 1/2 inch here. And so this is why on your scale rule, there's other sides, okay? So you may have the 3/4 inch scale or the 3-inch scale. So that means that every 3 inches equals a foot. This is really good if you're going to do detail prop drafting. There's the 1.5 inch scale. So for every 1.5 inches, there's a foot. You don't need to get too deep into those, but once you've mastered 1/4 inch, you're going to be able to use any scale from that point on.